Thank you, Shreya. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to what I'm sure will be an amazing conversation with one of the leading visionaries from the medical world. Science and technology continue to reimagine our world, enabling us to accomplish things that seemed impossible a few decades ago. However, it is important to remember that these advancements are not an end in themselves. Rather, they are a means to an end to make human life better. Therefore, science and technology should be guided by a sense of morality and used in a manner that reflects our values and priorities. They must be subservient to the human mind and spirit. Today, technology is living up to these tenets, most notably in healthcare. It is rapidly changing how complex diseases are treated and mind-boggling surgeries are executed. Great doctors and researchers are playing a key role in these endeavors. Robots are increasingly transforming the field of surgery, making it possible to perform procedures that were previously considered too risky. The DaVinci Robot is a fine example. It's a testimony to how technology, when guided by the human mind and spirit, can be used to improve human life. Here is a short clip that showcases how the robot mimics the movement of the human hand, allowing surgeons to perform extremely delicate maneuvers. Let's introduce the robot through this video. We could not have asked for a better visionary to interact with us on this fascinating topic, Professor Prokar Dasgupta, Foundation Professor of Surgery at King's Health Partners and a Padma Shri awardee, an internationally reputed clinician scientist. Professor Dasgupta pioneered robotic surgery in urology in the United Kingdom. He has also pioneered the Dasgupta technique that has helped millions of patients lead a better life. Professor Dasgupta dons multiple hats as an educator, researcher, a leading authority in the field of robotic urology, and is a respected voice in the medical community. Welcome, Professor Dasgupta, to this fireside chat.
Keshav, thank you so much for having me. Namaskar, everyone, and it's a pleasure to interact with you. Thank you so much.
So, Professor, there is so much we want to hear from you. We have actually designed an interactive Q&A session, which will culminate in a rapid fire finale. Your surgery may be robotic, but I'm sure your inimitable storytelling is going to keep us all totally spellbound. So let's hit the rewind button, Professor. Tell us a bit about your roots in India, your childhood, educational background. Why did you choose to become a doctor?
Well, I was born in the Steel City, Rourkela, which is in Odisha. currently, as you know, hosting the World Club Hockey. In fact, on the Guinness Book of World Records, the largest hockey stadium in the world currently is in the place of birth. So this is an amazing achievement for Rourkela. I went there to St. Paul's School and spent the most amazing years of my childhood being educated by the Jesuits. And that's where I say that I learned public speaking, because that's what we had to do. We had to learn to be disciplined and speak in public. Part of my childhood was also spent in Lucknow, because that's my mother's ancestral home, the land of the Nawabs, so to say. And I distinctly remember flying kites on the afternoons from the rooftops of our ancient home, eating shami kebabs in the evening and listening to Ram Leela. So these are very vivid memories. If you remember, we used to put manja, which is a mixture of little pieces of glass and gum on the strings to cut each other's kites. So I write about this actually in an editorial called Flying High as a Kite, when I became the editor-in-chief of the 90-year-old British Journal of Urology International, a historic journal, and probably one of the most read surgical journals on the web. So I reminisce about that. Why did I choose to become a doctor when so many people around me were going into, for example, engineering? That was largely influenced by my grandfather, who was himself a doctor. And growing up, I aspired to be like him. He really was respected as a doyen of society. And I thought, why not go that way? Everyone else tries to go into engineering. And in those days, you are influenced by people around you. So that's what I did, and I have not regretted it.
Amazing. So after receiving your degree from Medical College, Calcutta, you decided to pursue your career in the UK. So how was your early life and career in UK? And who influenced you to take up urology as a surgical specialty as well as robotic surgery?
So the medical college years were fantastic. They were preceded by, again, a very special place where I spent 2 years in between St. Paul's School, Rourkela, and Medical College, Calcutta. Medical College, Calcutta, by the way, just last weekend, celebrated its foundation day, 28th of January, and it is the oldest medical college in the East, 1835. So I was very privileged to have been educated there, and stalwarts like B.C. Roy, the Dr. Bharat Ratna B.C. Roy, were part of the faculty. So this is a very, very special place. But in between came St. Xavier's College, which really shaped my mindset and brought home a love for Kolkata as a city. But then, I was training to become a surgeon with Professor Prabhat Chaudhary, who was my professor-in-chief at the time. And he taught me how to remove the spleens, which became massive. The spleen is an organ on the left side of the tummy. And in these patients, the spleen grew to 3-4 times its size because these patients had a parasitic disease called leishmaniasis. You might have heard about it, Kala-Azar. In those days, 30 years ago, it was a certain death if it didn't respond to tablets. But removing the spleen of these patients really saved their lives. And then we started wondering, why was it that such an operation would change the course of that patient's life? And I started looking at the immune system, which is the defense system in the body against this parasite. So I started taking blood samples and looking at various different types of immune systems. So at the time, my mindset was, I love immunology, I love surgery, but I really want to go to Harvard to do immunology. So that was the mindset. The love for science was absolutely addictive, in addition to the love for surgery. Around that point, quite by accident, I met an inspirational urologist called Chris Booth, who is still a good friend, retired now. There's a urologist in a Roman town in the east of England called Colchester, an ancient town. And he said to me, look, I have a job for 6 weeks. Why don't you come over and let's see how it goes? So I came. After 6 weeks, I went back. In the meantime, we had published a paper jointly. And then Chris gets in touch saying, look, I have a colleague who has a job in Cornwall in a few months' time. Do you want to come? So I said, look, I'm hoping to take over Professor Chowdhury's practice because he trained me to do this amazing operation saving patients. He said, well, what do you have to lose? Come over to UK, have a good time. Let's see how things go. The rest is history. I fell in love with Cornwall. So did my wife. I then went into the Institute of Urology. I went to the National Hospital in Queen Square, where really the Dasgupta technique developed. I also spent some time in Johns Hopkins, where I got a fellowship to work with Professor Lou Cavussi, an inspirational robotic surgeon in the late 90s. And of course, I was influenced by the man himself, the first robotic surgeon in the world, Mr. John Wickham, now the late John Wickham, who really was an inspiration to me. And actually, in my own operating room in Guy's Hospital, again, a famous hospital in the UK, I operate in the same operating room where John Wickham performed the first robotic procedure. So this is a historic room. It's called Theatre 7, and I operate there now, inspired by John Wickham. So that's my story of how I moved from being a small town boy into the UK and becoming a robotic surgeon.
It's all faith, they say. And I'm sure all your students look at you and say, that's the inspiration.
You have to follow your dream. You have to dream big, no question. If you can't dream big, then the dreams won't come true.
Doctor, the DaVinci Robot is completely revolutionizing the world of surgery. And you are clearly an expert in the use of this robot. Can you tell the audience a little bit about why this robot is unique and revolutionary?
There is a common misconception, Keshav, which, to an extent is how the press think the DaVinci robot works and how the public thinks, particularly patients who haven't had this kind of surgery. And the common misconception is that I program this amazing machine, I press a button, and then the rest of the time I have this. Just sip coffee while the machine just goes on its own and does the work. Nothing could be further from the truth. The DaVinci system today is the state-of-the-art device, which is now over 20 years old. And thankfully, I was one of the first people to use it. And I have seen every possible generation of this amazing system over the last 20 plus years. So this is a form of keyhole surgery where, say, you have to take out a cancerous prostate gland which sits down in the lower part of the tummy in a man, or say you have to take out the bladder or part of the kidney for cancer. Normally, we would do it by making a significant cut, which would mean a lot of blood, a longer stay in hospital, a lot of pain, and possibly more complications. We went on a journey thinking that surely we can do this through small holes, which is keyhole surgery, otherwise known as laparoscopic surgery. The problem with keyholes is that it is quite a challenging operation. Because you don't have a big cut and because you don't have your hands inside the patient, it is more difficult to reach inside the tummy. It's more difficult to get to the target organ, and it's more difficult to take it out. Although the plus side to it is that you lose less blood, you have less pain, you go back quicker. So the DaVinci robot takes keyhole surgery to the next level. If you use a robotic instrument, and I give an example of my pen, this is my pen, and in traditional keyhole surgery, I would have an instrument which would be straight like this pen. In robotic surgery with the DaVinci, it would be different. The tip of this pen would be like my wrist, so it would move like a human wrist. So immediately you can see that things become a lot easier. The second thing is the vision inside the patient is magnified at least 10 times. The third is that the instruments are completely tremor-free. So say you have a surgeon with a little tremor in their hands, and most men or women will have a little bit of tremor. Because this is a computer, it completely filters out the tremor. So the instruments just move very, very smoothly and very, very accurately in a small space. So that is the beauty of the DaVinci system. Keyhole surgery through 5 or 6 small holes rather than a big cut. These arms go inside. There's a camera inside which magnifies the organ many times. The arms have little wrists. They're completely tremor-free, but they're all controlled by a surgeon sitting at a console. So it is not the case that the robot is programmed and does things on its own. It is completely under control of the operating surgeon.
Well, you've explained such a complex robot so easily. I feel so comfortable. I could almost say that I would be happy to go, meet you for a surgery, but let's wait for that. Next one. The use of technology is now becoming commonplace in most aspects of healthcare. So what are your views on the play of both robotics as well as technology? And in this whole scheme of things, how is this impacting the bedside manners for doctors? Because that's important too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. I think the most important factor is that bedside manner. For the patient, it is certainly the bedside manner. And if the pandemic has taught us anything whereby we can't meet face-to-face or couldn't meet face-to-face and have to do it on Zoom or on Teams or whichever way, we have had, as doctors and surgeons, improve our electronic manners. So I call it e-panache, and that to the patient is the most important. Although they can't see the rest of my body, it's the body language and the smile on the face, the warmth that the patient has to feel. Because half of it, as my granddad used to say, is up here. If you can win the mind of the patient, whatever else you do physically will be fine. But if you cannot win the mind, then you can do whatever you wish. You can be a great surgeon. It's just not going to work. The patient has to trust you. So I think despite technology and the surgeon being made remote in many cases in robotic surgery, for example, technically over a 5G line, I could operate a robot anywhere else in any other corner of the world. So that is technically and absolutely feasible. However, it does not necessarily mean that that is the way to go. Now, let me give you an example. We couldn't fly during the pandemic. So I was introducing a new robot made in UK called Versius by Cambridge Medical Robotics, or CMR. And the only other person who could give me some guidance, although he had not done this operation himself before, this was the first time I was doing it, was in Italy. And there was no way he could fly because it was the pandemic. So he virtually scrubbed into my room, because he was not physically there, using his iPad and a augmented reality platform called Proximity. So he's virtually transported. He can see my hands. He can tell me, Prokar, perhaps you should move things a bit differently. And there you see the play between what is available today and what will be available for the future. So virtual reality, augmented reality, I think very important. The other in the tech world, in my world, is the role of artificial intelligence. So I've talked about augmented reality, but what about artificial intelligence? We gather so much data during robotic surgery, or indeed any kind of interaction with the patient, where we can move different instruments. You can see them moving within the patient. You can then correlate that with what happens to the clinical outcomes of the patient. Because just because I can move something in a particular way doesn't mean the patient is going to benefit from it. Yeah, what looks great to the eye may not have the right clinical benefit. So today we can attach a black box to the back of the robot, say the DaVinci robot, and we can use machine learning to see if there are particular gestures that I make which lead to better clinical outcomes. How amazing is that? So my eye can't see that gesture, but the black box can see it. The beauty of this is I can then teach that gesture to the surgeon learning from me. This was not possible before, and I think this is good for patients. The final two things I want to say is about cost. Hardly anyone talks about this. We somehow think we can spend millions and billions and billions and we have unlimited money. This is not the case. I think it has to be about value-based healthcare in the tech world. With more robots coming into the market, more companies coming into the market, I think the cost will go down. So cost is important. Connectivity, I have already told you. Artificial intelligence, I have told you. And your final question, which is very close to my heart, is what about this real patient interaction? People ask me, Prokar, surely now you can automate using AI certain steps of the operation. Yes, sure. 5 years ago, one of my colleagues from the United States published results with a robot, not in humans, but in an animal model, showing that this robot could stitch 2 tubes better than a human being. It's called the STAR robot. Now, we got a large grant from 3 universities in the UK, myself from King's College London, but my colleagues from Southampton, which is down south, and Nottingham, and this is called Trustworthy Autonomous Systems. This grant was worth 33 million. Part of it is a hub, 11.7 million. Major investment from UK into artificial intelligence. And people started asking me, saying, surely you must be trying to now automate what you do, because surely that must be more accurate. I'm afraid this is science fiction. There are certain things which we can automate, but every human being, that judgment call is slightly different. So I am slightly different from you. My insights are slightly different from yours. And every surgeon, every technologist has to adapt to that difference. And that's where judgment comes in. And you cannot automate the movements for each and every patient. This is purely science fiction. I hope it does not happen during my lifetime, because I do not want to lose contact with my patients. I love looking after patients. And I just do not want technology to get to a point where we lose that human touch. I think that would be a very, very sad day for medicine.
Fascinating, Doctor. But I'm pretty certain that the Indian IT business can definitely take a lot of data that you obviously have captive and give you a lot of analytics that can help you in terms of some of the things that you're looking at. I mean, clearly you are an innovator. You're talking about technology, innovative new techniques. You gave us the Dasgupta technique. You're obviously pioneering lots of new things. But you give me a sense of what is now next in terms of your future, your mind, the next stage of evolution and innovation in your field.
So in my field, I think the main thing that I'm engaged in is surgical data science. So, and I'm very, 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 very excited by it. So let me, for example, show you something, and this might be of interest to your readers. Look, before we operate on someone, we take a lot of information, including amazing scans. And this is data. This is big data because we have it on thousands and millions of patients. But these amazing images, magnetic resonance scans, CT scans, are just sitting in a computer screen. We are not able to transport them into the patient, and I think that is a pity. That is a real pity that we do not have the technology to use these images to guide us in real time. So that's an example of surgical data science. Guess what? We have a study called the Tiger study, like tigers, Royal Bengal tigers. It's called Touch and Image Guided Robotic Surgery, TIGERS. So that's the acronyms. So let me show you something from tigers. You see, this is a prostate gland, okay? This is the actual prostate of one of my patients generated by his permission from his MRI. And you see the gland is the size of a chestnut, but if you look carefully here, you see this black thing here. Can you see it? That's his cancer, yeah?
Yeah.
So I know that when I'm removing this, I took this into the operating room because I can feel it. This is patient specific. I use that to counsel the patient as to what I would do. And I know that the prostate has two nerves on the two sides. I know that on the side of the cancer, if I hug too close, because I can feel the cancer, I will leave cancer behind. So rather than say to the patient a few weeks or months later, I'm sorry, I left some cancer behind, I am doing my best using data science, using artificial intelligence, because we can now generate this model automatically using Mona AI labels, which is an algo that we have trained. We have got something called auto prostate. Yes, it is in a lab, but you can see where I'm going with this. And I think a lot of my time and a lot of my PhD students' time is being spent in looking at the role of surgical data science and AI in the next generation of care that we provide surgically to patients.
Amazing, amazing, doctor. I must, on behalf of the entire audience, thank you for, the way you have conducted research in this area, and you take care of your patients so well. So on behalf of all your patients, let me thank you. But my next question, before we go into a rapid fire, as a role model for many aspiring and young surgeons, what are the, very briefly, the three most important messages you would give to them? And also, how would you actually, train more surgeons in this technique so that the robot can go into every village, every town, if there are, trained doctors available to manage them?
So the three things for not just surgeons, but anyone who feels, how was this done? How did I do it? Is this. And I'm not here to preach to anyone. First, do not be afraid to dream big. What's the worst that will happen? You dream, you wake up, the dream hasn't come true. But if you didn't dream, then nothing's going to happen. So do not be afraid to dream big. Second, always do your best without worrying about the outcomes. I think in modern life, we worry about the outcomes too much. Let's just do our best and the outcomes will follow. The third is to understand that we are part of a team. We need to learn from the team and help each other. I tell you what gives me real pride and pleasure is seeing other people within my group getting their readership, getting their professorship, succeeding in life, having a good work-life balance, and being happy. In the end, it's all about happiness. That to me is the meaning of life. We live to be happy. We can't be happy all the time, but that's what we should aspire to be. How do I train the next generation of surgeons? Well, the traditional way of see one, do one, teach one, in my mind is dead. 20 years ago, we launched the premium simulation program in the UK, and now it has stretched to all over the world. Let me explain this to you. This means that you go into a lab whereby you learn how to perform a particular operation, but you also interact with a team. This is called team training. My whole team go inside an inflatable igloo like you have for Eskimos. It has little cameras and everything inside it is real except there is no patient. So we can simulate an entire operation, we can record it, we can make mistakes, we can stress the surgeon and the team, and then we go and debrief without any blame. And guess what? Last year, we published the largest randomized trial. Randomized trials are where you compare standard of care, which is training without simulation versus simulation. And we did this across 15 centers in the world. UK, Europe, China, Japan, United States, and Canada. So this is applicable internationally. Half of the surgeons had simulation training. The other half had standard of care, i.e. they just operated. No surprise, proficiency in those who underwent simulation training. These are young surgeons who I am training, showed that they become more proficient quicker, particularly for the more complex procedures. And the more important thing it showed, for the first time ever, this is called the Simulate trial, it's now published, it showed that in the simulation arm, we reduced patient complications by more than 60%. This is very, very significant, very significant. And so that's how I train the next generation of surgeons. I imagine that every patient there is my family. Whether I think to myself, what would happen if that patient was my dad? Would I let an inexperienced surgeon have a go? Of course not. So why should it be any different for any other patient? And I try to instill that thought process in the next generation of surgeons. So that's what I do, and so far it seems to be working.
It's great. In our business, we call that train the trainer, and obviously is working very well. On your side as well. We'll wrap up in the next 5 minutes, Doctor, and we'll just go do a quick rapid fire. So you better keep the DaVinci Robot and your sutures ready for this one. 5 quick questions and 1 or 2 word answers. That's it. Okay. So what's that one quality a surgeon has that a robot cannot possess?
Judgment.
Great answer. What's the first thought on your mind as the steel of your scalpel or robot meets the skin of your patient?
Humility.
Lovely. Clinician, surgeon, professor, what's your next role?
Just being happy, helping the next generation.
Oh, that's great. One word that describes how you feel each time you receive a new recognition, including the Padma Shri like you received last year.
Very humble, actually. Receiving that from President Kovind is undoubtedly the most humbling and prestigious day of my life so far. I'll never forget it.
And we are all very proud of you. The one attribute you think every surgeon must have?
There are 2, actually, if I may say so. They have to be resilient and they have to be decisive. I say this because surgery is long training hours. So if you're not resilient, you're not going to do well as a surgeon. And secondly, the reason I say they have to be decisive is if you can't make that decision, either to cut or to walk away, you can never be a good surgeon. A surgeon who can't make decisions should do something else, in my opinion. Slightly old-fashioned, but that's how I feel it should be.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Again, mountain, beaches, or cities, your favorite holiday spot?
Mountains, without question.
I know you are an exercise freak, so obviously you're a climber as well. Well, congratulations, Professor, for your amazing reflexes in this, rapid fire round as well. So you're not just a, magician with the robot. You're amazing. But this conversation has really been a delightful experience for me, and I'm sure the audience as well. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as all of us did. I wish you a great success in blazing an even more glorious trail. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Keshav. An absolute pleasure to have this fireside chat with you. Thank you so much.
Back to you, Shreya.
For more interesting content, like, comment, and subscribe to our NASSCOM YouTube channel.